some of us, I think, mostly all of us, have seen Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the first couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think, you know, we came into this, like, I've been a bit jaded on the whole Game of Thrones universe at this point, right? We know Game of Thrones ended on a bum note to end all bum notes. Not necessarily loving House of the Dragon, especially with season 2. I was like, God, this is bleak. God, it's slow, and
it's
God,
only going to get bleaker. House of the Dragon, anyway.
Kind of hate everyone in it, and so, you know, what we needed was something to balance that out, right? And I feel like this is what we got with Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It is, in contrast to all those like labyrinthine plots that are just like move at a snail's pace and there's a million different things going on. This is a super simple story of a guy who just wants to get a bit of respect. He wants to become a knight and win a jousting tournament. That's kind of it, but then he gets drawn into something a little bit bigger along the way. It's a nice little self-contained adventure, and I kind of like it. I like that it's cozy fantasy in a lot of ways. It's still got that Game of Thrones edge in some ways, but I had a lot of fun with the first couple of episodes.
It's funny, I watched the first episode and I came away with a take that I think a lot of people did, which was like, it was fine. Seems like it's setting some stuff up. Who knows? There we go. And then when I found out that the book would take me 2.5 hours or 3 hours or whatever, I was like, oh, I'll do that. Fuck it. And then I rewatched the episode with Fringy, and I was like, oh, this is actually much better than I thought. Because it's like they've done all of the work they need to do. And then episode 2 came out, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be a good show. They're not fucking this up. They know what they're doing.
It's the one thing that I was slightly hesitant about, because I had similar-ish experience. I mean, I'd read all of the Dunk and Egg stuff before going into it, but had the similar take on episode 1 in the sense that if I pretended that I hadn't done that, what would I think of episode 1? Like, is there enough for a general audience member to really get hooked by in a 30 to 40 minute episode where, like, if you know what's coming, you can see loads of stuff that's being set up. If you don't know what's coming, what's it like for people? And I was kind of wondering, I'm fairly confident now that it's going to go on to be pretty good. It's so far extremely accurate for the most part. That always helps. The story it's accurate to is a good story. The scope will enlarge, but not at the expense of the charm that it has. All of that's fine. So I know that it's going somewhere good, but that's because I already knew it was going somewhere good. So for anyone who hasn't read it, is there enough there to sort of latch onto? I think episode 2 partially solves that problem, but I'd be curious if anyone here has seen it without reading it, what you made of it.
I mean, I hadn't.
I've seen it, not read it, and I'm enjoying it a lot. In fact, it's the first fantasy show I've really enjoyed since Game of Thrones, because I know it's a very low bar. It's stuff like The Witcher and The Wheel of Time and Rings of Power, just absolute trash. So I've been watching that stuff recently because I'm working on my award show at the minute, and I mention these crappy fantasy shows from last year.
Yeah.
So I've been watching them, and dear Christ, they're bad. And I identified one of the biggest problems with modern fantasy is what I call plot hopping. And it's where the plot just can't stand still. It has to hop from one region, one story, to another region, another story, another region, another story. I give an example in this video I'm going to release tomorrow or the next day, where there's a scene in I keep fucking confusing The Wheel of Time and The Witcher because they look identical. They even have they both have a lesbian couple.
Shit, Rings of Power looks the same as all them as well.
They all look the same. And I think it's Wheel of Time. And there's this Indian girl who's going through these mystical arches, which she must survive so that she can enter the higher echelons of the League of Diverse Women. And it was the only time I was invested because I wanted to see what happens when she enters these arches. But the show then plot hops, it jumps to these filler scenes. There's like 4 filler scenes of people talking shite. And none of it's important. It just evaporates from your brain the second the scene is over. And then it goes back to the arches. And it's just this hideous fucking plot hopping where you cannot get invested in anything because they keep jumping the fucking story around because they want to imitate the epic scale of early Game of Thrones. It's horrible to watch, and all of the modern fantasy shows do it. What I really loved about Night of the Seven Kingdoms is that it just let me enjoy the fucking story that was on screen. It wasn't pulling me away to some other region that also looks like downtown LA before then pulling me to another region that also looks like downtown LA. It was just it's one guy doing his thing, and I was able to follow him along, and I wasn't having to remember a million different names, and it was all quite clear and simple. And there is a lot going on. You know, it's a clever, charming show, but they get a lot of the fundamentals right. For a start, the character's actually likable. That helps, especially when you've watched Starfleet Academy. It's a show that gets all the fundamentals right and is avoiding all of the mistakes that modern fantasy makes.
It does, like, because there's a moment, right, where it's like he picks up the sword for the first time and the Game of Thrones music like kicks in, and it's like, oh, this is a proper epic fantasy moment, and then it just immediately cuts to him taking a shit beside the tree, and it's like, okay, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's like, it's a very obvious fucking like, oh, look at us subverting like the heroic fantasy trope with this grounded like moment. It's like, okay, I think it's the weakest point
of both episodes is that both episodes begin with a kind of joke, a bit like that, which is like, and like, I don't necessarily think they're even that bad, but it's like it's by far the least subtle and interesting. It's the most meta of all of it, and it's the first joke in both episodes. And as soon as it gets over that, it almost seems like it's not quite confident of itself in the first scene. It really wants to tell the audience this is the tone we're going for. But then it settles down, and actually the diegetic humor in it is pretty good. There's lots of quite funny stuff that just happens perfectly naturally in the course of dialogue, such that you don't really need the shitting scene, and you don't even need the giant prosthetic penis scene, because they aren't really reflective of the tone of everything else.
You could skip that 10 inches and it'd be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and whether you want to is not the question.
They just both movies worked like crazy for me. And I was watching the second one with Gary and Bree, right?
That's because you're the long man.
What are you talking about? You fucking make fart jokes all the time. So, like, when the giant cock appeared, I think Gary was like, "Whoa!" Just like laughing my ass off already, because it's such an obvious, like, they just want to shock you and be like, yeah, look what we fucking got in you. And it's like, I don't know, I kind of in sync with the creators on that one. I was like, that's funny. Anyway, moving on, sort of thing.
Yeah,
but like, the characters, I think Duncan's great. Duncan the Tall.
I like him as a character. I think they picked the perfect actor to play him.
He's good
because he is. Yeah, he's like Sam from Lord of the Rings. Ultimately, like good-hearted, fairly simple, like maybe a little bit gullible, but a good person, and just trying to like make his way and do something good. And I think that's great. It's nice to see a person like that like thrust into the Game of Thrones world, and not just be made a laughing stock like he.
Where traditionally good people do not do well.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's the thing that's really soured me on the whole Game of Thrones world over the years. This idea of like, well, we can't have heroes. The very concept of a traditional hero is outmoded now, and it needs to be like, replaced by something much more cynical, much more like morally gray. And these heroes that you used to look up to, like, they're just going to get killed off because that's what would happen to them. It's like, oh, come on, fuck off. Stop trying to be so fucking edgy, George, you fat bastard. But like, that just gets old itself after a while. Like, it's like trying to replace one trope with another, which then becomes tedious unto itself. But like, this is something that feels just a bit more honest and real, and I appreciate that. I like it.
I mean, it comes from his work, so I guess you'd have to roll back those statements, huh?
Well, to a degree, but then this isn't
it?
When this is like some little novella or something. It's not something that you have to, as an author, care too much about. It's like, yeah, you can afford to take a little chance. You can go against the grain with it a little bit, but ultimately, maybe he struck gold with something like this and hit upon something that people actually want.
According to him, he has as many as 10 more Duncan Egg chapters to make, like novellas or whatever. So I think he does care a bunch about the characters. And of course,
avoid Winds of Winter, buddy.
Oh, he's
I was on the George R.R. Martin boycott, but because this is a little self-contained thing, I thought, fuck it, I'll check it out, kind of thing. But I think Despot's right. I think it's the simplicity of the story that lends itself to the accessibility.
I'm pro simple.
Yes, it'll get more complex as time goes on. Obviously, as has been mentioned, that you will get the conspiracy that sort of more happens around Dunk than it happens because of him. It allows his fundamental and essential goodness to sort of be more emphasized, because even when plotting does start, he kind of remains the same simple, stolid person with a good sort of value set, uncomplicated, who is sort of thrust into a bigger story. But there is also the other side of it, which is that because it's one thing to have your hero be heroic, but it's another thing to allow other characters to be good as well.
Yes.
And early Game of Thrones did do this, I think, more than it's often remembered. Most people sort of just remember Game of Thrones, what it became from, say, like season 4 onwards, where it is just hyper cynical. There are no good people. Any hero will probably die. But in the first 4, you have characters like Tyrion, to an extent, Varys. You've got, obviously, Ned Stark does die. But you have a few surviving characters who are not uncomplicatedly cynical or evil or villainous. It's only after season 4 that everything sort of becomes incredibly bleak, and that's become the meta now. Whereas, when you have that situation that you try to imagine yourself in that world, and you think, where the fuck does anybody have fun? Like, what does anyone look up to? What does anyone respect in anyone or anything if every single position of authority is undermined by the person within it? But what you get in the Night of the Seven Kingdoms is not just Dunk is fundamentally a good character, but you also have some good highborn characters. You have the Kingsguard is actually not just what it became under Joffrey. It's like you can see why people look up to it and the people who made it there. There's actually is a degree of meritocracy, I suppose you can say, in how the world functions, which would inspire the small folk to look up to their betters. It's more like there is more happiness overall in the story, and obviously, like, it won't all end well for everyone, but you're shown characters even in positions of nobility and royalty who are not cynical. Some of them are actually quite upstanding, which is a nice change from what the meta became after Game of Thrones season 4.
Which is an interesting additional context, considering like the whole point with Robert Baratheon's reign is that he allows way too much of like snakes and rats to get too close, to get too much power, to basically tear the kingdom apart right before he doesn't realize it until too late, sort of thing. So this taking place near 100 years before those events, it's like, like it squares a different context, which again, if everything was actually complete. Because for the record, by the way, that statement about the additional Duncan Egg stuff, he said I don't think he's done any since he made that statement, which was like 10 years ago. so yeah, it's just even more things that he hasn't done.
It's not a super recent thing, and I thought this was something he'd made within the last 5 years.
No,
I think he wrote it in the 90s, right? The first one, he's written 3, and he's given the outlines for up to 12 more to the guy who's the showrunner for this season.
But like,
Jesus,
had he completed all of Duncan Egg? Had he written in full detail the actual like Fire and Blood, all the history there, and then all of a song, like just everything, and they adapted it all into a one enormous TV show that was like 100 seasons? It would be interesting to talk about it in totality for what maybe the overall point is. But as Platoon's just pointed out, it's like there's like different things to draw from A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, while simultaneously being like, well, it is part of the universe, and it's also a high budget, high production HBO show. And so how does it like as a variable or a different dimension with the other two shows? It's kind of interesting for contrast. But I just really appreciate, like, it's just a guy. He's a good person. He's trying to make it through, and his sincerity, how it cuts into other people in this world, like specifically there's like the whores and the smith who are both ready to sort of mock me.
Yeah.
They're both like sort of ready to be like, don't take advantage of me, while insulting him somewhat. That he's just like, oh, well, don't do that, or oh shit, I don't have the money. Oh well, I'll go. And at both times, they're like, oh, you seem kind of like nice. Like you seem like that.
He's like a little puppy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's good to know that like not everyone in this world is just going to like use and abuse him or take advantage of him and screw him over and stuff. Like they've got a little bit of compassion for someone who's just trying to be a good person and trying to make his way, and sometimes they might be willing to do him a little favor.
Even the Hand of the King wasn't a complete prick to him, so it's quite nice.
Dude, Baelor's awesome. I hope to see more of him, and the Laughing Storm. That was as much as there's some age issues and some possible height issues, but the spirit of the characters, like the energy each of these actors bring in, they're like spot on. Very much looking forward to it. I
like it. Like I'm way more interested and excited to watch this than I am for House of the Dragon. And
I thought of that because I read the books before House of the Dragon came out. So it is going places. It is going to perhaps slightly more familiar places in the sense that all has to end in a particular way, and that way is maybe more of a piece with people's general perceptions of the franchise than Night of the Seven Kingdoms is.
So they had the writer's strike at the same time as those final 2 episodes getting chopped off, meaning they were fucked, right? Like they couldn't change anything, and like legally, and so they didn't get that final fight. Which, as much as I've got many issues with what happens to certain characters in that season, had it ended with the fight that's going to happen now at the beginning of season 3, I think people would be much more positive and engaged with House of the Dragon. That I seriously think HBO fucked up big time by chopping that off.
I kind of agree, but then at the same time, like the fundamental tone and like ethos of House of the Dragon, basically since season 1, like since Viserys died, since we lost him, I felt less invested in the show.
I get what you're saying, because like I've seen
he was like the anchor that like kept everything held together, like emotionally.
You are
like,
completely right, because that's like what they go right. Like his death destroys the whole family. Mm-hmm. Like they all want to take each other out. So like it's hard. The notion of like I'm not sure who to back, or I don't like everything's so bleak and everyone's dying. It's like that is the story.
But it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also like the question of, do I particularly care who I back with House of the Dragon?
Well, I mean,
yeah, because
if you know how it goes, it's not going to matter too much who you back.
Yeah,
and that's the fundamental problem with this show, where it's like there's a bunch of well-written characters played by good actors that I just don't give a shit about because they're not likable people. Like they've got no good qualities about them that I root for. And so when I'm not rooting for anyone, it's very difficult to be invested in the show because there's no dramatic tension about whether or not my favorite character is going to succeed or fail or whatever, or the person I hate is going to get their comeuppance, because it's all just this like morally gray soup. You know,
the other problem with that is in terms of the stakes, and this is something that Night of the Seven Kingdoms does brilliantly. It establishes its stakes very well, because I haven't read the book, so I don't know what happens in the tourney, but it makes it very clear that Duncan has everything riding on this tournament. If he loses this, and he's probably going to lose it, because it's, even if you're a very skilled, experienced knight, you probably still lose a tournament just due to the sheer math of it. It's almost like winning a poker tournament. You can be, you're because there's so many things that has to go right for you to win. So if he loses this, he basically loses everything. He's going to be completely impoverished. He's not going to be able to ransom back his horse and armor and sword and things like that. So he really needs to win, but you do get the sense that he's probably not going to win, because he's been a spectator at the first joust, and the whole point of that scene is to show how skillful and how well armored and how experienced and how well trained these house princelings are. And that he's kind of out of his depth here. It's kind of like a local boxer showing up to try to fight an experienced pro. He's just going to get hammered. But, who knows? Maybe he'll win the tournament. I'm really invested. I'm really interested in seeing what happens in the tournament, because it could go anywhere. He could go in and it could be a reality check. He could go up against a real knight who's been properly trained and who, annihilates him in 30 seconds. Or he could put in a really good showing, and it turns out he has been very well trained by his something of a degenerate master. But the problem with House of Dragon, so there's real stakes there. I actually care about the outcome of the event. But in House of Dragon, it's like, well, if this dickhead doesn't take power, some other dickhead will take power, and ultimately there's no ideological difference between those two factions of the family. And so it doesn't really matter to the average peasant or to the kingdom in general who wins the war. It's just a power struggle between dickheads. So I don't really care about the outcome.
And that kind of thing might have worked if they were super likable. And it's like, well, there's a tragic element to like two factions that I really like. I totally see where both of them are coming from, and I really like both of them because they're actually really good people. And that, like, watching them tear each other apart is just like horrifying, but like also you're compelled to watch it. But again, that's that problem with House of the Dragon, where it's like, as you say, it's a bunch of selfish dickheads who I don't care who wins because they're all horrible.
It's amusing because Alicent and Rhaenyra have like lost my investment in both of them by the end of season 2. But ironically, I'm still kind of invested in they're subordinates in a sense, like Damon and Otto. But that could very well be because of how fucking amazing both those actors are as well.
I was going to say,
But
yeah.
I do. The writing for, if you remember, like Otto has a fucking brilliant scene in his second episode, but then he's just gone for the whole season after it. And I was like, fucking hell. I'm not saying he can carry the show or anything, but it would have been nice to have more of him. I know because this is canon wise, like what they're adapting, Otto's story kind of fizzles out at that point. But what I was going to say was like with what you were talking about there, Despot, what I think is going to work out in this show's favor is this, judging from having read the book, this season is going to have like the whole thing is kind of about the notion of a knight and the sort of the world. Has it lost its like senses on the importance of what knights represent and stuff? So as to whether or not you can like make it through this tournament that's going to be coming up, it's I think you'll be interested in where the story's going to weave and end up turning into, because like I've had a friend who's
going to get more Machiavellian as time goes on. It is a Game of Thrones kind of universe.
Sure.
It's going to remain pretty simple, like it's straightforward, but it will get like, so a friend of mine was like, it's so nice to not have to involve like a million royal families, and I was like, oh, we'll be involved in some royal families. It's gonna happen, but
the Machiavellianism is around as opposed to the product of Duncan has been mentioned earlier. So like he will encounter all of the stuff. Although you would expect a degree of scheming to happen because it is a George R. R. Martin story, but it's not. Exactly. That doesn't overtake the strength of the core idea, which is essentially the rugged knight who's not particularly clever, and the unlikely friendship he strikes up with the small kid who is well educated, knows all of these courtroom dramas, but doesn't necessarily have the education in simple, good old-fashioned values. And that's sort of the clash of those two, and how they complement each other's strengths is what gives the entire story its sort of emotional appeal.